Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Michigan Conservative Roundtable, and I'd like to share with you what I found to be an amazing success story. It's how a 50-year-old man who knew almost nothing about firearms came to capture 65% of handgun sales worldwide. And this is how it happened. He was born in 1926. As a teen in World War II, he was in the Wehrmacht at the behest of the Nazis, and by his own definition, he had minimal weapons training, which consisted of he saw a handgun, rifle, and grenade. The war ended. He became an adult, at which point he began inventing different sorts of items. First in his garage, and then he bought a small factory. He made curtain rods. He made munitions belts for machine guns, practice grenades, an entrenching tool, which is like a small shovel. Many of his inventions involved the use of polymer material, which he had advanced knowledge of. He held 16 patents. In 1980, he was meeting with some military representatives, looking to sell some of his inventions to them. During the course of his conversation, he found out that they were looking for a new sidearm. They were currently, at that time, using the World War II Walther P-38s, and they wanted something much more modern. He asked if he could submit a handgun. They told him yes, but the reports are some even snickered about his success. Because remember, he didn't know anything about handguns, and he certainly didn't know how to make them. So how did he do it? He first bought all the handguns he could get his hands on, disassembled them entirely, learned what all the pieces, how they worked, and their purpose. He assembled a team of consultants. He attended police academy classes, took private shooting lessons, and even built a private shooting range in the basement of his house. To determine the angle of the pistol grip, he had wooden mock-ups. And on one occasion, he was meeting with his military guys. He asked them to hold these mock-ups and point them, first with their eyes open, then closed. This enabled him to determine the angle of the pistol grip to be 20 degrees. As he made his prototypes, he shot them with his left hand. He was a right-handed person, but he shot them with his left hand under the assumption that if there was a catastrophic discharge, the weapon, of course, would be destroyed, but if he was injured or maimed, he'd still be able to work and write with his right hand. In 1981, he filed for his 17th patent. In 1982, Gaston Glock presented to the Austrian military the Glock 17. The fact that the Glock 17 had a 17-round magazine capacity was coincidental, or that it met 17 requirements of the Austrian army that most gun manufacturers were struggling to meet. In 1983, Glock 17 was officially adopted by the Austrian and Norwegian militaries. Austria alone ordered 25,000 of its handguns. In 1984, the Glock 17 passed the NATO durability test. What made the Glock so different? And at this time, I'd like to show you. I have two Glocks here. These are not Glock 17s, they're Glock 23s. Glock 17 is a 9mm, these are 40s, but they work the same. And so what we have here is I have a Glock fully assembled, and I have a Glock field stripped. And the lower receiver is plastic or polymer. Space age plastic, for lack of a better term. And you can see how light it is. It's lighter, it's cheaper. It also required less parts. Glock 17 had 35 parts. Most manufacturers at that day had 45 to 60 moving parts. When he designed this, he designed it with no manual safety. In an interview, He claimed he saw no need to make a manual safety since there are 3 safeties internally on this handgun, and I'm going to describe them at this time. First is the trigger safety. Right here. This trigger cannot be squeezed until that little lever is depressed, at which point it fires. Upon firing, the slide will cycle, and when it cycles, it cocks the mechanism. And now I'm going to take the disassembled Glock, because now I got to show you the 2 other internal safeties. And what we have here, and I'm going to grab this and point, there's a firing pin block, and you're going to see the tail end of the striker right here. As you squeeze the trigger and shoot, this part raises the firing pin block so that the firing pin is allowed to make contact with the primer on the cartridge, thus the discharge, the bullet shoots, blah blah blah. And but also you got your striker here. You got your striker right here. And this part of the frame allows the striker to fall while it simultaneously raises the block. So there you have there are 3 safeties. You have the trigger safety, you have the firing pin block, and then you have the release of the striker mechanism. This design did not exist prior to Glock. He incorporated polygonal rifling. Conventional rifling consists of landing grooves. And if you were to take a barrel and look directly down the barrel, you would see distinct cuts in the barrel. And that's called landing grooves. And landing grooves will have what's referred to as a rate of twist. The rate of twist spins the bullet as it's being pushed out the barrel with the intent to stabilize the projectile in flight, thus maintaining accuracy. Glock, he did not invent polygonal rifling, but he did incorporate it, and polygonal rifling has been kind of described as hills and valleys. In other words, landing grooves have distinct cuts. Polygonal rifling is more smooth as it goes through the barrel, and he determined that that was more efficient in the gases propelling the bullet through the barrel, and basically higher velocity. Keep in mind, up until this point, up until he began this, he had no knowledge of firearms. In an interview, he did an interview once, and they were asking him how he came to this, and he credited his lack of knowledge as being his advantage. His lack of knowledge, he literally started from scratch. He had no preconceived notions of how a gun should operate. He simply made a gun in the manner which seemed most logical. Thus, with the Glocks, and I'll take this one as, you see no hammer here. Up until that time, most firearms had a hammer. Hammer fell on the firing pin went forward. There's no hammer, simply a striker which is released upon the trigger being pulled. In 1984, the United States implemented the assault weapons ban. And while the assault weapons ban was aimed at the 30-round magazine capacities of the AKs and ARs, the Glock also was a specific target of the assault weapons ban. As the Glock was becoming more and more popular, it was being referred to as the plastic gun. How, because it was the plastic gun, it was undetectable to X-rays and metal detectors, which is totally untrue. This is metal. This is metal. The bullets that would be in your magazine would be metal. All these things would be more than enough to make the firearm detectable. Hollywood didn't help. A lot of times they'd have the bad guys carrying the Glocks. And the good guys, the police officers or whoever, they're carrying the Smiths, the SIGs, the Berettas, the revolvers, but they kept the bad guys to the Glocks. Senator Chuck Schumer specifically mentioned the Glock in pushing for the 1994 assault weapons ban. As much as we all like Bruce Willis, his Die Hard 2 movie didn't help either. His fictitious reference to a Glock 7, a porcelain gun, that gun never existed, doesn't, never has, never will. They say imitation is the highest form of flattery. Shortly thereafter, Smith came out with the S&W Sigma. It so closely resembled the Glock design Glock suit and one. Smith had to pay royalties to Glock for every Sigma they sold. Today, most handgun makers do incorporate a mold injected polymer frame consisting of some kind of a striker mechanism. In a 2003 interview with Forbes, Gaston Glock referred to the U.S. government and its politicians as extortionists. In 2004, the assault weapons ban expired, which we now are allowed to buy high-capacity magazines for our firearms. Glock now makes handguns for all the major calibers besides the 9. You've got the 40, the 45, and even the 380. And what we have here is the 40. They make 3 sizes: full size, compact, and subcompact. This would be the compact size, so the full size is going to be a bit bigger, the subcompact would be a bit smaller. There's a moral of this story. Too late to be a gun guy. Gaston Glock was not a gun guy until he hit his 50s. So, to our viewers out there who are thinking, oh, I'm not a gun guy, jump in, because he sure did. I hope everyone found this story as interesting as I did. Thanks for watching. And as we say on the Michigan Conservative Roundtable, be safe, watch your 6, and don't tread on me.